Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've dealt with people questioning my disability more times than I can count, but this one incident still makes my blood boil years later. When I was around 25, I was in a pretty serious car accident that left me with permanent nerve damage in my legs and spine. Some days I can manage with crutches, other days I need my wheelchair. The worst part isn't even the physical pain, it's the constant judgment from people who think they can tell just by looking at me whether I'm disabled enough to deserve accommodation. By the time I was 31, I'd mostly learned to let the stares and comments roll off my back. I had my disabled parking badge, my parking disc, all the proper documentation. I followed every rule to the letter because I knew people were always watching, always ready to question me. This day I had a routine checkup with my doctor. Nothing special, just a regular appointment to manage my prescriptions and check on my progress. I drove myself to the clinic like I always did and pulled into the designated disabled space at the end of the street. The spot was clearly marked, and I made sure my badge and disc were prominently displayed on my dashboard where anyone could see them. I was gathering my things when I noticed a car pulling up behind me. Not just behind me, but right up against my bumper, so close that I immediately started worrying about how I'd get out of the spot later. There were no other spaces behind mine, so this car had essentially boxed me in. Before I could even process what was happening, there was this violent tapping on my window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The sound was so frantic and aggressive that, for a split second, I thought I was being attacked. When I looked over, there was an elderly woman pressed up against my window, knocking nonstop like her life depended on it. She had to be in her 70s at least. I rolled down my window thinking maybe she needed help or there was an emergency. Instead, she immediately started yelling at me about how I had no right to park in the disabled spot. She went on about how this was a disabled spot and her husband needed it for his doctor's appointment, so I needed to move my car immediately. She finished by saying it was absolutely disgusting that young people these days had no respect for anything. I just stared at her for a moment, completely shocked. I literally couldn't find words. My silence seemed to make her even angrier. She launched into another tirade, demanding again that I move my car right away. She accused me of being lazy and said the spot was for disabled people, not young people who couldn't be bothered to walk a few extra feet. I finally found my voice and tried to explain that I needed this space too because I was disabled. I told her if she looked at my dashboard, she'd see my disabled badge right there displayed clearly. That's when she completely lost it. She accused me of stealing the badge and insisted I was too young to be disabled. She even threatened to call the police on me for committing fraud. Something inside me just snapped. I'd dealt with this kind of thing before, but I was tired. Tired of justifying my existence, tired of proving myself to strangers, tired of being told I wasn't sick enough or disabled enough or old enough. I reached over and grabbed my badge off the dashboard. I held it up to her face so she could see my photo on the back, proving it was actually mine. Then I told her she needed to step back from my door because I needed to get out. Normally, on a decent day like this one, I could have managed with my crutches. I kept both my crutches and my wheelchair in the car for exactly this reason. But after the way this woman had treated me, after accusing me of faking and stealing, I decided she needed to see exactly what she'd done. I took my time pulling out my wheelchair from the back seat. Every movement was deliberate and slow. I assembled it piece by piece right there while she watched. When it came time to transfer from the car seat to the wheelchair, I made sure she heard every grunt of pain, every sharp intake of breath. The pain was real, it always is, but I'll admit I put on a bit of a show. I wanted her to understand. The whole time she just stood there watching with this horrified expression on her face. She didn't offer to help, she didn't apologize, she just stared like she'd seen a ghost. Once I was settled in my chair, I closed the car door and locked it. Then I looked her straight in the eyes and asked her sarcastically if I was disabled enough for her now. Her face went completely white. Every bit of color drained away like someone had pulled a plug. I told her she should be ashamed of herself. I said she was the one with no manners and no respect. I explained that it didn't matter how old someone was, because disability doesn't discriminate, unlike what she had just done. I pointed out that not everyone who's disabled looks like what people think they should look like. I didn't wait for a response. I started wheeling myself toward the clinic entrance. Behind me, I heard her scrambling back to her car. I looked over my shoulder and watched her reverse away from my bumper quickly, then speed off down the street like she couldn't get away fast enough. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was so desperate for that parking spot for her supposedly disabled husband. Yet the moment she realized I actually was disabled, she didn't even care about parking anymore. She just wanted to escape. I made it to my appointment on time. My doctor noticed I seemed more stressed than usual, and I told him what happened. He just shook his head and said he'd heard similar stories from other patients countless times. Invisible disabilities bring out the worst in some people. This happened when I was 31, and I'm 38 now. Just last month, someone left a nasty note on my windshield calling me a faker when I used my crutches instead of my wheelchair. It still happens regularly, but that day with that woman at the clinic, that was the day I stopped trying to be polite about it. That was the day I realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation or a performance to prove my pain was real. I've been with my boyfriend for almost 2 years now, and for most of that time we've had a long-distance relationship. He lives 3 states away, so visits are special but complicated. This particular trip had been planned for months. Saved up my vacation days and booked my flight to spend a full week with him and his family. The visit went well overall. His mom was warm and welcoming, his dad cracked jokes at dinner, and his younger siblings were fun to hang around. I felt like I was finally becoming part of their world. My boyfriend seemed happy to have me there, showing me around his hometown and introducing me to his favorite spots. On my last evening there, my boyfriend announced at breakfast that he wanted to take everyone out for a special dinner. He said it was his treat and that he'd already picked the perfect place. His parents tried to protest about the cost, but he insisted. He called up his aunt, uncle, and cousin to join us too. By the time we were getting ready to leave, our party had grown to 7 people total. The restaurant he chose was one of those all-you-can-eat places where you cook your own meat at the table. There were little grills built into each table, and the menu advertised unlimited barbecue and sushi. The pricing was simple, one flat rate per person, but if you left food on your plate at the end, they charged extra for waste. Here's the thing about me and food. I've never been big on red meat. It's not that I won't eat it, but it's not my go-to. I much prefer chicken and seafood. And pork, I just don't eat it. It's a personal preference I've had since I was a kid. My boyfriend knows this. We've had countless conversations about it over the time we've been together. He's seen me order at restaurants dozens of times. He knows exactly what I will and won't eat. When we sat down at the restaurant, everyone started ordering. My boyfriend took charge of ordering for our end of the table. He ordered platter after platter of pork belly, pork ribs, beef short ribs, and beef brisket. The meat just kept coming. I watched the server bring out plate after plate, stacking them on our table. His family members were excited about all the food. His dad started joking about needing to skip breakfast the next day. I ordered my own food separately. I got chicken skewers, shrimp, a bowl of rice, and some grilled vegetables. I made sure to order only what I could finish because I didn't want to waste anything or get charged extra. The dinner started out fine. Everyone was cooking their meat, passing plates around, talking and laughing. His mom asked me about my flight home the next day. His cousin told funny stories about their childhood together. I ate my chicken, my shrimp, my rice, and my vegetables. Every single bite. My plate was clean. My boyfriend kept looking at me while he cooked the mountain of pork and beef in front of him. He loaded up a plate with beef and pushed it toward me. He told me to try some of it. I took a few pieces to be polite. The beef was fine. Not my favorite, but I ate it. His aunt commented on how much food there was. His uncle said we should pace ourselves. Then my boyfriend pushed a plate of pork toward me. I hesitated, looking down at the glistening pieces of meat. He asked me what was wrong. I told him I was pretty full. He gave me this look. It wasn't playful or teasing, and it was stern, almost a warning. His jaw was tight. He insisted I just try some. I felt my stomach clench, and it wasn't from the food. I felt like I couldn't say no in front of his whole family. So I picked up one small slice and ate it. It sat heavy in my stomach, and not just because I was full. His mom asked if I was enjoying everything. I told her yes, that my chicken had been really good. A few minutes later, my boyfriend tried again. He picked up another piece of meat with his chopsticks and held it out toward me. He claimed it was more chicken thigh, but I could see it clearly. It was pork. The color was wrong, the texture was wrong. I told him no thanks, that I was really full now. His face changed completely. The warmth drained out of his expression. He set his chopsticks down a little too hard. The sound made his mom look over at us. For the rest of the meal, he barely looked at me. He laughed and joked with his family, but when I tried to join the conversation, his responses were clipped. When I asked him to pass the water, he slid it across the table without a word. His mom kept looking between us with a confused expression. The drive back to his parents' house was tense. His family chattered in the back seats, talking about how full they were. His dad said it was one of the best meals he'd had in a while, but up front it was silent. I could feel the anger radiating off my boyfriend. I tried to make small talk about the restaurant, but he just gave one-word answers. When we finally pulled into the driveway and everyone else had gone inside, he turned to me in the dark car. He asked if I knew how much he just spent on that dinner. I started to say I didn't ask him to, but he cut me off. He said $200. $200. And all I ate was 3 pieces of chicken. I told him that wasn't true. I ate everything I ordered. My plate was completely clean. He said I barely touched the beef and refused the pork. He said everyone else was enjoying the food he ordered while I sat there picking at chicken like a child. He asked if I had any idea how ungrateful that looked. I stared at him, feeling something cold settle in my chest. I pointed out that he chose that restaurant. He invited 6 other people. He ordered all that pork and beef, even though he knows I don't eat pork. I reminded him that we've talked about this so many times. I ordered my own food, and I finished every bit of it. I asked him how that was ungrateful. He said I made him look bad in front of his family. He said he was trying to treat everyone to a nice meal, and I couldn't even pretend to appreciate it. I told him I did appreciate it, but eating my own food wasn't disrespectful. I told him I ate my own food, and that was all anyone could expect. He said that wasn't the point. He said the point was that he spent all that money, and I didn't even try to enjoy what he ordered for the table. He said his family probably thought I was rude. I asked him if he seriously expected me to eat food I don't like just to make him look good. He shook his head and got out of the car without another word. I sat there for a moment, feeling the weight of the whole evening pressing down on me. When I went inside, his family was in the living room watching TV. His mom asked if everything was okay. I told her yes, just tired from the week. My boyfriend had already gone to his room. I flew home the next morning. He drove me to the airport, but we barely spoke. He didn't walk me to security like he usually does. He just pulled up to the drop-off area and popped the trunk. When I tried to kiss him goodbye, he turned his head, so I got his cheek instead. Now he's been texting me, saying I owe him an apology for ruining the dinner and embarrassing him. He said his mom asked him if we were fighting and he had to make up an excuse. He said I should have just eaten what he ordered like everyone else. He said if I really cared about him, I would have made more of an effort. But I don't think I did anything wrong. I didn't ask him to spend that money. I didn't ask him to order food I don't eat. And I certainly didn't waste anything. I ordered responsibly and ate everything on my plate. I'm starting to wonder if I really know him at all. This side of him, the one that cares more about appearances than my actual comfort, is new to me. Or maybe it was always there and I just didn't see it until now. My property line extends pretty far out toward the road, and I haven't gotten around to putting up a fence yet since I just bought it recently. Most neighbors use the driveway like normal people, but apparently that's too much to ask from everyone. About 3 months after I moved in, this guy who lives 4 houses down started cutting across my lawn with his truck. Not just a little bit either. We're talking a full diagonal drive from the street right across my grass, leaving deep tire tracks every single time. His truck was one of those expensive lifted models. probably cost more than my entire house. You know the type, all chrome and attitude. The first time it happened, I figured maybe he didn't realize it was my property. I caught him the next day when he was outside washing his precious truck. I walked over and politely told him I'd noticed he'd been driving across my lawn and asked if he could use the street instead. He barely looked up from his truck. He said it wasn't fenced, so he thought it was public property. I explained that it was actually mine and that it goes all the way to the edge there. He shrugged and said it was faster his way, that it cut off like 30 seconds from his route. I stood there for a second thinking I must have misheard him. I told him it was tearing up my grass and that I'd really appreciate it if he'd stop. He finally turned around giving me this look like I was the biggest inconvenience in his life. He told me if it bothered me that much, I should put up a fence. Until then, he wasn't going the long way around. Then he just went back to washing his truck like the conversation was over. I walked away pretty stunned. Who acts like that? But he kept doing it. Every single day when he came home from work, I'd hear that loud engine and look out to see him barreling across my lawn. The tire tracks got deeper. The grass was completely destroyed in two parallel lines cutting straight across my yard. I tried talking to him twice more. The second time he told me to stop harassing him. The third time he threatened to call the cops on me for harassment. I thought about calling the police myself, but for what? Trespassing. They'd probably tell me it was a civil matter and to take it up in small claims court. I looked into getting a fence installed, but the quotes I got back were way more than I could afford right now. The cheapest one was $3,200. The most expensive came in at nearly $5,000. I just bought the house and my savings were tapped out. I even called the county to see if there were any ordinances about driving on private property, but they said without a fence or clear no trespassing signs, it would be hard to enforce anything. The guy on the phone suggested I document everything with photos and timestamps in case I wanted to pursue it legally later. So I started doing that. Every day for 2 weeks, I took pictures of the fresh tire tracks. I noted the times he'd come through, always around 6:15 in the evening. I kept a log of every conversation we'd had and his responses, and I even talked to a few other neighbors to see if he'd done this to anyone else. Turns out he had a reputation for being difficult. One neighbor told me he parked his truck in front of their driveway for 3 days straight last year and refused to move it. Another said he'd complained to the HOA about their kids playing basketball in their own driveway because the noise bothered him. My buddy from work came over one weekend to help me with some painting. He saw the tire tracks and asked what happened. After I explained the whole situation, he just shook his head and told me I had to do something because this guy wasn't going to stop on his own. I showed him all the photos and the log I'd been keeping. He looked through them and said I had plenty of evidence, but that it would probably cost me more in legal fees than it was worth. I asked him what I could possibly do since the guy wouldn't listen and I couldn't afford a fence. My buddy said I needed to make it so he couldn't do it anymore. He suggested a few ideas, some more extreme than others. That got me thinking. I spent the next few days working on a plan. I went to the hardware store and bought a big box of roofing screws. The long ones, about 2 inches each, cost me $18.79. Then I waited. I started watching his schedule even more carefully than before. He came home every day at almost exactly 6:15 in the evening, like clockwork. Never earlier than 6:10, never later than 6:20. The day I decided to do it, I got home from work early and waited. At around 6, I went outside with a small bag of screws and casually scattered them across the exact path he always took. Not obvious, just pushed them into the dirt and grass at angles so the points were sticking up. I used quite a few of them, spread out over the whole track line. I made sure to place them deep enough in the grass that they wouldn't be visible from a moving vehicle. Then I went inside and waited by the window. 6:15 rolled around, and sure enough, I heard his truck coming down the street. He turned onto my lawn without even slowing down, same as always. His truck bounced over the screws, and I watched him pull into his driveway 4 houses down like nothing happened. I went out after dark and collected all the screws I could find, making sure there weren't any left that could hurt someone else. Checked the grass carefully with a flashlight. Found about a dozen that hadn't been driven over. Then I went to bed. The next morning I was having coffee when I heard yelling outside. I looked out and saw him standing next to his truck, which was sitting noticeably lower than usual. All four tires were completely flat. He was on his phone, probably calling a tow truck, and he looked absolutely furious. I watched him kick one of the flat tires, which probably hurt his foot more than anything. He walked around the truck a few times, inspecting each tire. Then he got down on his knees and started looking at the treads. A tow truck showed up about an hour later and hauled his truck away. I found out later from another neighbor that he had to get all four tires replaced. The bill came to around $800. Apparently told the tire shop he must have driven through a construction zone or something. The tire guy apparently found screws in all four tires and asked him where the construction zone was, because he should report it. He couldn't give a straight answer. He started using the actual street after that. Every single day I'd hear his truck go past on the road like a normal person. He never cut across my lawn again. Never said another word to me either, but I was perfectly fine with that. About a week later I saw him outside and he wouldn't even look in my direction. Just went straight into his house. My grass eventually grew back over the tire tracks. Took a few months, but now you can barely tell they were ever there. I still haven't put up a fence. Turns out I didn't need one after all. I moved to a new school halfway through second grade because my parents got divorced and my mom needed to find cheaper housing. Being the new kid was hard enough, but being younger and smaller than everyone else made it worse. Most of the other kids in my class had been held back a year or were just naturally bigger, so I stuck out like a sore thumb. There was this one girl in particular who made my life miserable from day one. Let's call her Karen. She was taller than me, louder than me, and seemed to take personal joy in making me feel small. She'd knock my books off my desk when walking by, spread rumors about me to the other kids, and constantly call me a baby because I was younger than everyone else. The worst part came when the school had a costume party for New Year's. My mom had just gotten me this beautiful pink cape with feathers around the collar. It was the prettiest thing I owned, and I felt like a princess wearing it. Karen saw it and immediately started gushing about how gorgeous it was. She asked if she could borrow it for the party since her costume wasn't finished yet. I was so desperate to be liked that I said yes. The party came and went. Karen wore my cape the whole time and got tons of compliments. When I asked for it back at the end of the night, she just shrugged and walked away. The next day at school, I approached her again and asked for my pink cape with feathers back. She acted like she had no idea what I was talking about. I insisted that I'd lent it to her for the party and that she wore it the whole time. She told me I was making things up and that she never borrowed anything from me. I tried telling our teacher, but without proof, there wasn't much anyone could do. Karen had witnesses who backed her up, probably kids who were scared of her too. I went home crying that day, and my mom was furious, but the cape was gone. Things got even weirder after that. One evening, our home phone rang. My mom answered it, then handed it to me with a confused look on her face. It was Karen's mom. She told me I needed to stop bothering her daughter and that she'd heard all about how I wouldn't leave her alone at school. I tried to explain that I didn't bother Karen and that she was the one who took my cape and wouldn't give it back. Karen's mom called me a liar and said her daughter would never steal. She told me to stop calling her daughter names and spreading rumors, or she'd talk to my mother about this. Then she hung up before I could defend myself. I was 8 years old and getting threatening phone calls from an adult. My mom tried calling back to sort things out, but Karen's mom just denied everything and insisted I was the problem child. For weeks after that, Karen tormented me even more. She'd gotten away with stealing from me and turning her mom against me, so she felt invincible. She called me names, mocked my clothes, and made sure everyone knew I was the baby of the class. I wanted to tell on her so badly, but I knew that would just prove her point. She'd call me a tattletale and a baby, and the other kids would never let me live it down. Then one day during recess, everything changed. A group of us were standing around talking when Karen decided to escalate things. She called us all babies, then pointed directly at me and called me a lesbian. The other kids gasped. I had no idea what that word meant, but I could tell from everyone's reactions that it was something big. Karen looked smug, clearly proud of herself for saying something so shocking. But instead of getting upset or defensive, I saw my opportunity. I waited until we were back in class, sitting at our desks. Our teacher was writing something on the board when I raised my hand and made sure my voice sounded as innocent and confused as possible. I asked what the word lesbian meant. The classroom went silent. Our teacher's chalk stopped mid-word. She turned around slowly, her face already turning red. She asked where I'd heard that word. I looked down at my desk, trying to look embarrassed and small, and told her that Karen had called me that at recess. I asked if it was something bad because she'd said it like it was bad. The teacher's expression shifted from shock to fury in about 2 seconds. She walked over to Karen's desk and asked if it was true, if she'd really called me that. Karen tried to deny it, but 3 other kids immediately confirmed my story. They'd all heard it during recess. Our teacher was absolutely livid. She launched into this long lecture about how that kind of language was completely unacceptable and asked Karen if she had any idea how serious this was. She threatened to take her to the headmaster's office and said she was calling her mother in for a conference. Karen looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. But then something unexpected happened. Our teacher took a deep breath and addressed the whole class. She said that since this word had come up, she thought it was important we all understood what it actually meant. She explained that a lesbian is a woman who loves other women and that it's a type of sexual orientation, which means who someone is attracted to. She told us that some people are attracted to the opposite gender, some to the same gender, and some to both. She made it clear that none of these things are bad or wrong, just different ways people are. She finished by saying that using any of these words as an insult is cruel and shows ignorance, then asked if we all understood. We all nodded. For Russia in the early 2000s, this was probably the most progressive explanation any of us had ever heard. I tried not to smile too much. The next day, Karen's mom came to school looking absolutely furious. She and our teacher had a long meeting in the hallway while we worked on assignments. When Karen came back to class after being pulled out, she looked like she'd been crying. She didn't look at me for the rest of the week. After that, Karen completely left me alone. She stopped calling me names, stopped knocking my things over, stopped everything. The other kids saw what happened when she messed with me, and suddenly I wasn't such an easy target anymore. The funny thing is, years later when I was older, I realized Karen had actually been right about me. I do love women. She somehow clocked that about me when I was 8 years old and didn't even know it myself yet. But instead of her insult hurting me, it ended up giving me the perfect revenge and taught my whole class something important. I never did get that pink cape bag though. Still annoyed about that. I need to start with some background because it's important for understanding what happened. My real grandfather died when my dad was 15, my grandma remarried, and that man became my grandpa. I loved him more than anything. For the first 10 years of my life, I didn't even know we weren't blood related. He was amazing and he literally spoiled me rotten. But he never adopted my dad. Back then it wasn't really a normal thing to do, and later when it could have happened, my dad was already an adult, so they didn't even think about it. We lost my grandpa to cancer when I was 11. Before he died, he knew what was coming, so he sat me down and told me about his past. He wanted to warn me about my step-uncles. He'd been married before and had 2 sons, but his wife cheated on him and he divorced her. Those 2 boys might not have even been his biologically, but at the time he was listed on the birth certificate as their father, and nobody cared about what-ifs. DNA testing wasn't really a thing back then anyway. Both boys cut all contact with him when he left their mother. He tried for years to reconnect with them, but they refused even when they became adults. They said some pretty nasty things to him. One of his sons didn't talk to him for 25 years. The other one contacted him 15 years before my grandpa died, but only because he needed my grandpa to pay off his debts and give him free housing. My grandpa let him and his wife move in, and the guy tried to steal the house from him. My grandpa found paperwork the uncle had forged, trying to transfer ownership. So yeah, no more contact after that either. My grandpa never met his own grandchildren from those marriages. That was the main reason he spoiled me so much. I was his second chance to be a grandfather. When my grandpa entered the final stage of cancer and was in the hospital, both step-uncles visited him for the first time since their last contacts. They brought paperwork claiming my grandpa was gifting his house to them. They tried to force my heavily sedated grandpa to sign it. Thankfully, a nurse came in and kicked them out. She threatened to call security if they came back. After that, my grandma took him home and took care of him herself to protect him. He died peacefully in his bed. Both uncles came to the will reading. Everyone was shocked when I was named as the only inheritor, even my parents. I was 11 years old. That made my step-uncles furious, especially the one who'd tried to steal the house before. They immediately took it to court. My dad represented me since I was just a kid, so I don't know all the details, but we won 2 years later. The uncle who hadn't been around for 25 years acknowledged the judgment and disappeared again. But the other uncle appealed, and it went back to court for 3 more years. The legal fees kept piling up. We had to use our savings just to keep fighting. We won again, but it took an emotional and financial toll on our family. We had to sell the house because of all the legal fees. My parents had spent almost $30,000 on lawyers by the end. A few days after we finally won the second court case, some realtor used the key and entered the house where my grandma still lived. He told her that her son was selling the property and there would be a tour in 10 minutes. She was shocked, but she knew we wanted to sell eventually, so she didn't make a big deal out of it. When they left, she called my dad and mentioned he could have at least warned her about the tours. That's how we found out about the listing on the internet. It had been put up almost a month ago, while we were still fighting in court. There were even photos of the interior of the house. The listing price was set at $200,000. My dad tried to call the realtor but found out he was blocked. He told my grandma to call him if they ever came back. 2 days later, my grandma called. She said the same realtor was there and told her there would be 2 tours this time. My dad went there immediately. He must have broken a couple of traffic laws because a 3-hour drive took him less than 2. He arrived and found the realtor showing a couple around the house. He confronted the realtor and demanded to know what was going on. The realtor tried to brush him off, saying he was interrupting a showing. My dad pulled out his identification and the court documents proving ownership. The couple left quickly when they realized something was wrong. Someone had called the real estate agency about selling the house. The fake seller told the realtor that he was abroad, that he'd been at court because of the house and had just won. He sent them fake paperwork with forged signatures. The realtor never verified any of it. They just saw the money they could make. Their commission would have been $20,000. The fake seller mailed them keys and told them when to enter and take photos. He even arranged some tours before they got caught. The dates he gave them were when court hearings were scheduled, so my grandma wasn't home. My dad had been blocked because the fake seller told the realtor that my dad's number belonged to a thief who was trying to steal his house. The realtor never saw the fake seller in person. All communication had been through email and phone calls. We couldn't prove it was my step-uncle, even though we knew it was him. Those keys still had a keychain my grandpa had put on them when he gave them to the uncle years ago. It was a little metal compass that my grandpa loved. We couldn't prove the realtor knew about any foul play either. The police didn't help at all. They just gave the realtor a warning and told him to delete the listing. The realtor even had the audacity to try to convince my dad to continue selling with them. He said they already had interested buyers lined up. My dad refused. You might think the realtor was innocent, that he truly didn't know. Maybe that's true, even though they were guilty of negligence when they didn't verify the ownership, which is literally the easiest thing to do. Anyone can check public records. It takes 5 minutes online. What he was definitely guilty of was how he tried to scam my dad afterward. He sent us an invoice claiming we were breaking the sales agency agreement. You know, the contract we never signed, because we weren't the ones who put up the listing. They wanted 10% of the listing price of the house. That meant they wanted $20,000 from us, or they wanted to keep being the only realtors listing our house, which would guarantee them $20,000 as commission. That realtor truly believed my dad was some countryside simpleton he could scam. He kept calling and leaving messages about the invoice. He said if we didn't pay within 30 days, they would take legal action. Unfortunately for him, We were still in contract with a very expensive and very good lawyer from all the court cases. Our lawyer quickly reminded him how easily we could sue if we wanted to. He mentioned fraud, trespassing, and harassment. The invoice was taken back immediately and we were never contacted by them again. My dad later found out through a friend that the realtor had been fired from his agency. Apparently, this wasn't the first time he'd cut corners on verifying ownership. In the end, we used what money was left from selling the house and bought an apartment just 30 minutes walk from us. After all the legal fees, we had about $60,000 left. It was enough for a modest 2-bedroom apartment. My grandma spent the rest of her years there, with us visiting every week. She lived there for another 8 years before she passed. I live there now. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.